Hello and welcome to the winners interviews of this year's Inside Market Data and Inside Reference Data Awards. Now, my name is Victor Anderson, and I'm happy to have on the line with me today Emma Kalliomaki, who is Managing Director of ANA and the Derivative Service Bureau, or DSB, which is a subsidiary of ANA, and Malavika Solanki, who is part of the management team of the DSB. Now, the reason why we're chatting today is because the DSB won the Best Reference Data Initiative at this year's IMD and IRD Awards. So firstly, welcome Emma and Malavika, and thanks very much for making the time to chat with us today. Now, as we know, the DSB was founded approximately 4 years ago, specifically designed to address issues around the identification and reporting of OTC derivatives under MiFID II. And as everybody in the industry knows, MiFID II came into force at the beginning of January 2018. I think it was January 2003, January the 3rd, sorry, if my memory serves me correctly. Now, Emma, as MD of the DSB, to what extent do you believe the founding of the DSB has achieved its aims?
So you're correct there. The DSB was initially established due to the EU regulatory mandate of MiFID II and MiFIR, which came into effect, and you're right, 3rd of January 2018,
yep.
For the purpose really of providing for OTC derivatives the International Securities Identification Number, known as ISIN,
yes.
the classification of financial instruments, known as CFI, as well as the financial instrument short name, known as FISIN. Now, each of these, they're all globally recognized and adopted ISO standards for identifying, classifying, and describing financial instruments.
Yep.
Now, given the scope of the mandate, DSB stakeholders comprise a broad spectrum of users with varied needs. We're talking from credit institutions and small brokerage firms through to your buy-side, sell-side, and trading venues. So really, collaboration with stakeholders is essential to shape the solution. Mm-hmm. And through our product committee, combined with industry consultations, this ensured that the requirements of the mandate were met, and it enabled firms to then fulfill their regulatory reporting obligations.
Yep.
And further to that, the DSB delivered the solution on time and under budget, which in itself is a great achievement. Mm-hmm. And today, we're facilitating access to more than 4,000 individual users and over 500 institutions, of which more than 70% of those consume their data free of charge.
Yeah.
Now, given that the service continues to evolve, and it's driven by that ongoing engagement with our stakeholders who are shaping the service to really realize the benefits and efficiencies of standardization and data alignment. And so on that basis, I would say the initial aims really have been more than achieved.
Good. Okay. Malavika, I want to put the next question to you. And that is, let's chat a little bit about, as Emma said, the aims of the organization have been achieved. Let's talk a little bit about the initiatives that the DSB has delivered over the last 12 months or so that have helped industry participants in their day-to-day OTC derivatives business and or functions. What would you say the kind of the highlights have been over the last 12 months?
What I would do is echo a statement that Emma made to start out with, which is this idea of consistency and data standardization, which I guess, although unsurprising, really sits at the heart of what we're trying to get done. So within that, what do we mean? So a couple of things that industry said that they found particularly valuable yes. were very much in the rates derivative space. The first being that in order to support an enhanced piece of regulatory guidance that had been published earlier in the period, the DSB basically did a number of different things, the first of which was to agree what standardization looked like and was going to look like for the market in that context. Mm-hmm. The second thing we did was then take that information a step further and effectively embed a calculation that the regulators had provided into the heart of a whole slew of product templates. Mm-hmm. And by doing that, what that meant was institutions that had certain pieces of information could consistently come into the DSB and get a standard set of data, no matter what they would, no matter where in their systems or processes they were getting the original source information from. Right. And the third piece, also linked to it, was that we provided a standardization tool And that was open source and freely available to anyone that wanted it. And what that let people do was industry participants basically could take all that work we'd done, throw it into their own code systems, test it around so that well before they ever came to us, or it frankly went into any other part of the market infrastructure, they were able to pick that up, embed that in their tools, test their systems, run all the way through so they could be confident they had consistently standardized data. So that was the first piece of it. The second piece of it was still in the rates space, but almost equally important, but from a different perspective. This was focused very much on IBOR reform-related efforts. So through the DSB Product Committee, which has regulators and a broad spectrum of different types of institutions, we worked with that group of individuals and institutions and effectively started horizon scanning for the various risk-free rates that had been made available under the new framework. We then also worked with the International Standards Organization to understand what values they had and try and embed the whole thing into our templates. So a fair amount of effort, as you can see.
Yeah. Brilliant. That sounds really good. And I guess the whole LIBOR issue is still needs to be resolved, right? That is going to be an ongoing piece of regulatory reform over the next however long it is, year to 18 months, right?
Exactly that. It's going to be, I think it's going to be very, very central. And the lesson that I think we as industry have collectively learned is there is some, along with all the very important conversations about contracts and fallbacks and all those, and valuation and those things. There's also a piece of this which is about the reference data that needs to accompany those new rates. So typically the risk-free rate working groups are focused on trying to get, on agreeing the name, etc. But what we've found through this process is not just the DSB, but as market infrastructure providers generally in the data space, we need confirmation of what the name is, when it's going to be made available, when and all of those kind of things, so that we can integrate it into what we do.
Yep. Good. Okay, Malavika, you've spoken about some of the key initiatives that you've brought to market over the last 12 months or so. Let's talk a little bit about what you're hearing from market participants right now, who typically you would speak to on a regular basis. What are their current regulatory reporting pain points right now, and how do you believe the DSB is helping to address those challenges?
So I'll take the first part of your sentence first to start with, actually, which is we live in unusual times, which is an understatement. And this is around the world. So the first thing we did was really look at making sure that our infrastructure was stable. And this goes back to February, March time, right, when volatility was at its peak, when people were figuring out how to work from where, and that infrastructure stability point should not be, cannot be underemphasized, or should not be underemphasized, I should say, because what that really meant was, from our perspective, because of what the DSB does and where it fits in the industry workflow, it was imperative that institutions have confidence that no matter what, they could continue to come to the DSB and know that we would be up and available. So we spent a lot of time looking at what that meant in terms of our technology deployment, etc. So we introduced what we call initially a technology freeze, and subsequently where we are now is that we have a continued heightened awareness period, so that any changes that are introduced are carefully monitored. And only the critical stuff goes in, because we have to be cognizant of, we've been through the fact that we've been through one period of volatility, and with a whole slew of market events occurring outside, the next few months are likely to also be in a similar situation. So we've been looking at our cloud architecture frameworks. We've been looking at utilizing a range of different cybersecurity standards and those pieces. The second thing is looking at specifically the evolving regulatory requirements, because that's the other part of this. And on that side, we've been working on, again, through the product committee and then the communication out subsequently to participants, so there's transparency. We've been evaluating the implications of a transition of international standards. So the classification for financial instruments is a particular standard that is used for reg reporting purposes. That will be evolving from that has evolved from a 2015 standard to what is now a 2019 standard. And that has a number of implications for OTC derivatives. So we've been working with participants to really map out those implications, both from a product perspective and workflow perspective, because that will impact all of us in the market. The second is that, and Emma will talk about this more, I'm sure, The second is that as there's another piece of legislation that will be, likely to be coming out in the coming months, and this is not news. It's for those people who've been monitoring the situation, they'll be aware of this. That in late 2022, there will be an expectation from a number of major regulators of something called a unique product identifier, or a UPI, being reportable. And what we've been doing is working with participants to start to map out the hierarchy between the CFI, the UPI, and the OTC ISIN. And the rest of our focus is very much continues on the theme of the work we did in the last 12 months, which is how else can we best support standardization and data alignment for all participants.
Good. Thanks, Malavika. Emma, let me put the final question of this little clip to you, and that is, we've heard about from Malavika about what the DSB has done over the last 12 months in terms of supporting industry participants. What can we expect from the DSB over the next 12 months in terms of new developments, maybe initiatives and or services? Emma, what would you say to that?
So I think, as with previous years, the DSB progresses items that have been approved by our stakeholders during our industry consultation process. So a few examples that we can expect to see next year includes introducing a new user type, so to allow for search-only programmatic connectivity, so that's utilizing API for read-only access. And this has come directly through user feedback saying that they need some additional functionality based on what we are offering today. Similar to that, another type of access is looking at how functionality to allow users to create bespoke snapshots of the data. So being able to look at extract data for certain periods in time, rather than just relying on our end-of-day file processes that they need to aggregate and collate themselves. On the technology side, so Malavika had already touched on some of the efforts that have been in place with regards to info security matters, as well as the cloud infrastructure architecture. So whether single versus multi-cloud architecture and its regional deployment, for example, will be a focus of our technology advisory committee, helping us shape and ensure that we have a stable and secure platform for how we move forward with the solution. And that's quite critical on the basis of who we're offering our services to today, but even more so extending that to a broader user base, given, as Malavika touched on, the UPI initiative will be coming into effect within the next couple of years. On the standards front, there'll be focus that will be placed on the implementation of the latest revision of the CFI standard. So that will impact all market participants, in particular for OTC derivatives is where the main changes were made. So that requires us to have the appropriate planning in place for its adoption and implementation, given the downstream impacts for CFI, given the importance to the regulators who are using that data for their own aggregation and distribution purposes, but also for all of the market participants who need to report it as part of their reporting obligation. Now, lastly, as Malavika touched on, the emphasis and preparations will be placed on the forthcoming unique product identifier, the UPI. So that initiative has been progressed by the Financial Stability Board, and it has the primary aim of allowing or facilitating effective aggregation of OTC derivatives transactions on a global basis. Now, the DSB was designated by the Financial Stability Board last year, so we are as the sole UPI service provider. So we are working with all stakeholders, including the regulatory community, to ensure that the solution that we'll be putting in place aligns and leverages what we do today, to make sure that everyone is prepared and ready for its implementation, but also that the level of awareness and preparation can be managed accordingly. And so it will be quite a busy year, but as Malavika said, the expectation for UPI coming to effect is into Q3 2022. But we all know, given many of the regulatory mandates that have come into effect, that it does take time and preparation for that readiness. So we're hoping by starting that within the coming year, then we'll all be able to transition together and ensure that there is a streamlined and harmonized approach to how we implement GPI.
Good, good. Okay, Emma and Malavika, let's leave our conversation there. Congratulations again to both of you and, of course, the DSB for its win in the Best Reference Data Initiative category of this year's Inside Market Data and Inside Reference Data Awards. Thank you to Waters Technologies readers for listening to this call, and I look forward to catching up with all of you in the not-too-distant future. Thank you.